It can be the tripod, whatever you want to call it. You've got to have all three of those. And then what we end up doing is asking them to answer three questions. What's the current culture at this organization? What would you like it to be? And how can we get there? And from there, we build from there, and we develop values, we define the values from that particular organization's perspective.
Welcome to Unlocking Commerce and Business. I'm Connie Davis. Like a lighthouse cutting through fog, this marketplace of voices illuminates where commerce systems break down and what's already working to repair them. We go deep into communities, exploring where pain hides behind financial systems, uncovering extraction patterns in relationships, blocks in money movement, and barriers creating economic instability for vulnerable populations. From survivors of economic abuse to system innovators, these conversations don't just diagnose, they point toward trauma-informed, human-centered solutions. Essential listening for collaborators, partners, funders, and change-makers building regenerative alternatives. Welcome to the era of restorative commerce. Now let's get into today's conversation. Well, I'm really excited to have you here with me today. You tell me where you would like to start, if there's any objectives, not even objectives, but topics. I love the topics of just meandering, but I wanted to talk a little bit. I've had some experiences over the last week that I thought maybe we could talk about today and give people a real good sense of how you look at culture.
Okay, sure.
In the work that you do. But first, let's just start with a little bit of your background, because when you shared, some of your journey, I thought this, you have so much depth. So let's talk about the depth and where you landed and how you got there, because I think that powers up the why you do what you do. Where did you start?
Sure.
When did you decide? Let's talk about culture. When did you decide that culture and how it influences corporate really needed your attention?
Connie, it's interesting because I am a voracious reader, just voracious. And I like to try, I read about leadership, management, and all the related topics. And I try to be diverse in the reading that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked up a book one time, Culture is Everything. And I read it and I was like, gee, that's interesting. Okay. And got some nuggets from it, fine. And these are the kinds of things that happen. And I'm not going to say even by coincidence, because I don't believe in coincidences. I don't know when it was, maybe a month later, whatever. I was talking to a food company here in New Jersey, and they were saying to me, I was talking to the chief operating officer and the CFO. We need management training, Ron. We need somebody to come in. We're a family run organization and things are just kind of a mess here. People are running around, blah, 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 and we need management training. Okay. And, talking with them, I said to them, gentlemen, yes, I agree. The company needs management training, except before you do anything with that, we need to get a culture established within the organization because there's no guiding light. People are running around like chickens without a head, and nobody understands what they're supposed to be doing. And that comes from culture. And that's where it started. I met with them. We started to put things together. And this particular story, Connie, does not have the happiest ending because they stopped doing it. I'm sorry, Ron, we've enjoyed this. We've got other priorities. Okay, that's out of my control. And again, I can't remember the timeline. It doesn't matter. About 2.5 years ago now, I was at an event and I just happened to start talking with this guy, Jeff. And they were, just going back and forth. And he said, yeah, Ron, he said, I own a heavy duty towing company and a heavy duty towing transport company in the Indianapolis area. He said, I'm thrilled with where we are. Thrilled. We're growing. We're doing extremely well. We're up to 100 employees. And he just looked at me. He goes, "The one thing we've got to do, I want to establish a formal culture." And I just smiled at him and I was like, "Gee, Jeff, I think I can talk to you about that." And we had been working together now for about 2.5 years. And it has been so gratifying, so much fun to just see how I'm not sure I want to say how the company has changed. To see the difference, though, in how they're operating, in how they're working, and what a difference this makes. And I mean, it's just incredible. And and again, you and I were talking before, the show itself about relationships and everything else. We're not done yet. We're still working on it. We're still, finalizing everything, if you will. And these people are no longer clients. They're my friends now.
Oh,
And
it's
that's a
amazing.
joy. That is really a joy where it's just like, I really care about all of them out there, and I know they care about me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get better than that.
No, it doesn't. And and that's one of the things I love about this show is it really gives me the chance to, sit and just have an intentional conversation and figure out where the value exchange happens between people. And
Yes,
relationship is the only way to do that. How do you relate to one another unless you know that there's some value that they have? Some people go into conversations very intentionally, and it's like, I got to get something out of this conversation and I'm going to move on, and others really want to immerse and figure out, how do I build a connection? How can we empower each other? Because we're all running around in the digital world like chickens without a head
that's
sometimes,
right.
trying to do things. And things are rippling into us. And we
Yeah,
don't always have um, the ability to kind of prevent that from happening. But how do we still navigate?
that's right.
And that navigation, you can get lost by yourself in a big old densely populated community like Florida here,
Hmm.
or you can be in rural areas and be just as lost.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I've got to go back because you're making me think. And this was so impressive to me. I talked to the people at this company on a couple of different occasions, and we're like, okay, this is what we'll do, and we'll start with the culture, and then we'll get into the management training after that.
Hmm.
And I got a call from the one VP, and he said to me, "Ron, we're pivoting," and
Oh,
I was like, this is falling apart. And I was so disappointed. He said, "Ron, rather than you coming out and starting with the culture and then going to the management, Jeff and I were talking, the owner. He said, how about this? How about if you come out and just spend a week with us? Hang out with us. Get to know us better. Then we can go from there." And I was like, wow, okay. And oh my goodness, what a wonderful week it was.
yeah.
First of all, learning about the company, learning about them, learning about what the current culture was like, what we need to modify, and just all of those other things. Without that first week, Connie, never would we have had this kind of success. Never, never.
Yeah, I love the immersion. It's so powerful. And you know what I think it does, Ron, is it gives us a chance to slow down as human beings because I mean, I don't know about you, but my phone beeps at me all the time. I have calendars,
Hmm.
multiple calendars where I'm like, okay, what's going on here and what's going on over there?
Hmm.
And our calendars and the technology is dictating in many ways, like the types and quality of conversations we can have.
That's right.
And we have to intentionally immerse with the humans, human to human. Otherwise, what's going to run our lives? The technology will, right? The
That's right.
mission is only as powerful as the humans powering up the mission.
That's exactly right. And again, I'm also a very very big believer in Stephen Covey's work from the
Yeah.
Seven Habits. I mean, I'm so blessed to be certified to teach the class. And the one thing he talks about all the time is you need a personal mission statement
Yes.
because without that, How do you know where you want to go? How do you know what you want to accomplish? And he talks about this all the time is that I'm working so hard, personally or professionally. And then he just very nicely says, except what if your ladder is leaning against the wrong wall?
Mm,
It's like, yeah.
yeah. Leaning
So,
against the wrong wall. I mean, at least a mission statement sets you off in a direction. And I had a young woman actually, I did a little
mm,
interview with her, and I want to share this with you because I just posted a little clip of her on my YouTube channel. And she was talking about CEOs and culture. She was talking about
mhm.
nurturing the people that are working for them and actually seeing them if they're having a hard day and being not so far removed from the organization's workforce so that you can't see the people that are working for you. How does that land with you?
Oh, one of the activities I love to do, whether it's coaching one-on-one or with a group of people, is just have people talk about what is your role as a leader.
Mm,
Just from a bigger picture perspective, what's your role as a leader? And usually I'll have them put it on flip charts or a flip chart, whatever it might be. The debrief is always, okay, take a look, what's interesting? And they'll look at it, think about it. Some people get it, some don't. And if they need the prodding, what I just say to them, how much technical information is on that list? They'll look at it and it's like, oh, next to none. And I was like, that's right. What does that tell you about your role as a leader? It's about the people. It's about relationships. It's about motivating, guiding, helping, learning about them, building relationships, both personally and professionally.
hmm
I mean, I had a meeting this afternoon before we came on, and a guy Jeff came in, and his mother-in-law died last Thursday, and he came in and he sat down next to me, and I just looked at him and I put my hand on his shoulder and I was like, Jeff, how are you? And he looked at me and he was like, we're getting through it. Thank you for remembering. That means so much to me. That's what it's about. It's not like, Jeff, you're the CFO here. What's going on here? And what's the latest on? It's like, man, his mother-in-law just died.
Yeah.
Can we be nice? Can we be human here?
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder for everyone. There's so much going on and there's so many transactions happening out there. And that's something that, here on the show, we talk about commerce. And commerce, when I say commerce to you, Ron, what do you think of?
Just the only word that pops into my head with commerce is business.
hmm
And that's yeah, I tend to be a man of few words when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yeah,
Just
business.
commerce, business, exchanging of goods, though that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's totally fair. What if I were to say, well, I'll share my version of commerce. Commerce is an exchange of value, right? So in the old days, and
Okay.
I am an expert on commerce. I have studied the past, present, and future of money, which is really a big part of who makes, what makes me me, what makes
Yeah.
me me.
Right.
And the past, present, and future of money in the past we had marketplaces. We were trading goods between people. So if I needed rice and you needed sugar and I had sugar and you had rice, we were building a relationship in our local tribe, in our local village to be able
Hmm.
to exchange those goods. So your definition stands true. However, what preceded that trade was trust. And what preceded that trade was relationship and visibility.
That's it.
And so that is where, to me, I challenge us as a society, a modern society that is really, really immersed in the transactional value of a relationship, buying
That's
and
right.
selling a thing, a
Hmm.
widget.
Hmm.
And technology's so thick now, you can't escape it. Look at where we are. We're having a conversation. It's enabled this conversation,
Hmm.
but can it also hinder a relationship? Can it hinder
Yes.
connection between humans?
Yes.
Can
Yes.
it hinder culture?
Well, I mean, I think, the one thing that I'm thinking about too, Connie, is when you ask me that question, Ron, what does commerce mean to you? That also is the human element because we all define things differently.
We do.
I'll get back to you soon. What does soon mean to you? Because I know, again, just all
100%.
all of these different things, and I think so often people have lost sight of that. And going back to, can you just slow down? It's okay. Again, I'll go back to Covey. Stephen Covey says, it doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction.
Absolutely true. And to think that there's a book out there called Indistractable. Like, we need a book to read how to become indistractable. And I forget the author's name. I love the book. I think Niall or something. It's on my bookshelf. Um, but I loved it because it was a checklist reminding humans to go turn off all the notifications on your phone,
Right,
to go turn off all the calendars, or to book out time for yourself, for your own self-care and
right.
self-connection. And then there was a section, in another area, I was reading about diminishing behavior and how we can diminish our own productivity through the distractions and by not taking
Absolutely.
time to connect and to really lock back into our culture or our emotional needs and the relationships with the people that matter the most. And, we spend a lot of time at work. So let's talk a little bit. When you've seen the culture at an organization kind of dwindle and it's needing to be reset and
Hmm.
refreshed or
Hmm.
maybe reimagined,
Yes.
what kind of stories come to mind for you as far as who you've worked with and the ways that you've kind of approached that?
I'm working with a realty company right now. And in
Uh-huh.
fact, last week at this time, we were working on the culture development exercises.
Mm.
And the culture at the organization needs to be reset. It's a family-run business. The owner has been there for many, many years, and things have just gotten stale. And people again are just sort of it has become kind of like an accusatory culture, if you will.
That's
How did you
100%.
let that happen? What did you do? No, it was your fault. And those kinds of things. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I hope so. Some of the things that we did, number one, was that exact exercise that I explained to you earlier. What's your role?
Right.
We talked about something called the three R's. And for sustainable business success, which of these three R's is the most important one? Is it the results that you produce? Is it your reputation? Or is it the relationships that you have and you build and sustain over time? And what people end up realizing is that we need all three
Mm.
because I've got
Do.
to have relationships in order to get good results or sustainable results, which leads to my reputation, which then goes back to, and it's a circle. It can be the tripod, whatever you want to call it. You've got to have all three of those. And then what we end up doing is asking them to answer three questions. What's the current culture at this organization? What would you like it to be? And how can we get there? And from there we build from there, and we develop values, we define the values from that particular organization's perspective, because it goes back to what we were just saying a couple of minutes ago. We all define things differently.
We do.
So hey folks, at this organization, this is how we define proactive, this is how we define accountability. And then everybody, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, everybody will be on the same page.
No, they're
You
not.
try, you try. And Connie, the other thing that it's so interesting here with the stories is that talking to the owner and talking to the senior leaders and the other people is just letting them know, folks, as we go through this, you need to understand some people in the organization are going to leave because they don't like it. Additionally, you're probably going to have to let some people go who aren't buying into it. And if you're not willing to do that, then don't bother with this. I hope that answered your question.
It does, because the next topic that was really at top of mind for me, Ron, is I think about, there's the young woman that I mentioned who literally is, they've got a lot of anxiety about going into the workforce. I talk with a lot of youth.
Yeah,
Youth
yeah.
are going through their last years of high school. They're starting into the college. They're going into the entrepreneurial journey.
Hmm.
There's a lot of individuals that are learning technology and they're mastering the technology. But then when they go into the workplace, it's the humans and the culture that clashes. I can
Hmm.
do anything I need to do with the technology. My
Right.
schooling has prepared me to do that.
Yes.
I'm not prepared for the lack of, in some
Hmm.
cases, emotional intelligence and the ability to communicate.
Yes.
Or I'm not prepared for what do I do when my values don't align with the organization and they're not working, on conveying things that open up me for talent management. They want to manage the talent and have me stay there because they value my technology and my expertise and my technical
Hmm.
abilities.
Hmm.
But what about how I align with the mission of the organization or the culture of the leadership?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's a really real opportunity for organization leaders. And I think she was issuing kind of a call to action like, guys, if you're a CEO, I want to know how you're going to nurture your people.
That's right. Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, I always say to people, when you're going on an interview, you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. One of the questions I always ask, always, and going back to my corporate days, been a long time and still, it's like, what's the culture like here?
Right.
Tell me about the culture and how well do you think I will fit into it? And then I need to make that final decision for myself too. Is like, yeah. And again, I told you before the show, Connie, I made that silly mistake all those years ago about, yeah, I think I'll take a chance on this company. What a dumb thing to do, and what a mistake it was.
Yeah. And then you spend all that time internally processing where did I go wrong or what did I miss? There might be some of those reflective moments spent inside yourself trying to figure out where did the path turn or how could I have prevented, whatever happened. And I think as human beings, we spend a lot of time doing that as a whole. Most of us
Yes.
are pretty deep thinkers and analytical minds. So we're going to
Yes.
do that in our own decisions and life choices as well.
Right.
Yeah. So let's I wanted how or what have you seen when it comes to change management and how well culture makes room for change and change management that might be coming from outside influences, regulatory changes, things that are outside of the organization's control.
I think the last comment you just made is one of the real important ones relative to what's in our control and what's not in our control. And I have an old friend, Rich Michaels is his name, and Rich always tells the story, has or always asks the question of a group. Has anyone ever been caught in a riptide before? Who's been caught in a riptide? And typically one or two hands may go up and say, okay, what's it like to be caught in a riptide?
Mm,
Very, very scary.
mm,
And is that what happens if you fight the riptide? You really start to get exhausted. I mean, you can end up dying. You can end up getting truly pulled out to sea. Correct. What's the best way to deal with a riptide? Turn left, turn right, just swim a little bit, you will come out of it. And his point, you might want to, you say, talking to, again, participants, you might want to think of change as analogous to a riptide. Because if it's coming from on high, where usually it is, how much control do we have over it? None. So if we fight it, this is stupid, I hate this is dumb, they don't know what they're doing. All we're going to do is get tired. We're going to get aggravated. We have no control over it. How about if we just go with it? Can we just go with it? Hand in hand with that, on the other side of that, things things within our control. One of the things I always like to talk about when I'm taking people through or chatting with people about change. Number one, you always want to trumpet the goal. What's the goal of the change here? What's the rationale we're doing this? Now, that's the rah-rah part. And is that,
Yeah.
and there will be some people organizationally who will buy into the rah-rah. And I always ask my groups, or again, individuals, whatever, is that, will everybody buy into the rah-rah? No, of course not. Right. And this is one of the reasons I love to read so much. I still remember many years ago, I was at a gate at the airport in Charlotte, North Carolina, reading a book from Jack Welch, and he was talking about change. And the one thing he put in there that I have always held on to, always trumpet the goal, fine. On the other side of that, let people know what your fears are if nothing changes. And I was like, wow, that's really good. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I worked for Toshiba, we reorganize, we get a new general manager slash CEO on board for our very tiny division. Okay. This was so many years ago, Connie. This was I was in the copier and fax division.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Yeah, it was a long time
A
ago.
while ago.
I still remember Brian Merriman comes on board. Brian's goal, his mantra, and we all knew this, double market share in 4 years. That's what we needed to do. Tremendous undertaking, just tremendous. He invited everybody who worked east of the Mississippi River to a meeting in New Jersey to introduce himself to us and just, kind of lay things out.
Sure.
He's on the stage, he's doing his thing. Okay, folks, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to double market share. We're going to have the greatest time. Be a lot of work. We're going to have so much fun together. And he's doing the rah rah. And then he stopped and he got quiet and he was like, okay, let's look at this from the other perspective. You could hear a pin drop. If we don't double market share, Canon, Ricoh, Sharp, our competitors, will eat our lunch. This division closes if we do not double market share. So, folks, let's double market share because I don't want to be unemployed.
I
Both
love
sides
it.
of the equation.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the way to get people on board so that they understand what's at stake.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
When we
I just
understand
love
what's
that.
at stake, then it's more of a choice. You can either say, okay, I'm really not in line with working that hard to meet that type of a goal. I'm going to find something else to do. And you always have that choice. But now he's given them consent to be able to make that choice.
Well, and I mean, Staples, a number of years ago, the office store reorganized. New CEO. He calls everybody, not everybody, he called maybe the top 100, 200, whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
top leaders to a meeting. They're in a big auditorium. And he told them, folks, this is the way it's going to be. I'm making sweeping changes here, sweeping. And here they are. And he outlined them for them. Here's what's going to happen. You have 30 days to make up your mind. If you decide in the next 30 days you do not want to be a part of this, do yourself and do me a favor. Please come talk to me about it because I have contacts everywhere. I can find you another job and I will. I'll help you. Here's what else is going to happen. If you're here on day 31 That means to me you have accepted this and you're on board with the changes. If I find out day 31 moving forward somebody's not on board with this, I will fire you in a heartbeat. The choice is yours.
Pretty clear.
Yeah. And again, key thing, it's a choice.
That's right.
I'll help you find another job if you don't want to be here. Except if you're here, you need to be on board and support this.
Right, right. Well, let's pivot that a little bit because I think that there's a lot of corporate culture that people have been exposed to, and then they excuse themselves from corporate. There's a lot of people that have done that, that have resigned and I'm going to start a side hustle or my side hustle becomes my full-time hustle, and then
Hmm.
they realize, did I take some of my corporate culture with me and did it align with me? And am I working with old programming that belonged to a previous leader? And how do I realign that or recalibrate that with me as a leader of myself, as an entrepreneur or a small business owner?
That's
And
right.
does that trickle into the culture as they start to scale another net new organization?
Hmm.
What do you think, what are your experiences around that? Have you run into that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean that's one of the biggest reasons organizations need people like me. And
Mm.
I don't say that arrogantly, and I hope it doesn't
No,
come across that way, Connie, because it's so you're so spot on with your comments where it's like, well, we've been doing it this way for 11 years. And it's like, that's 11 years ago. The organization has grown, it has changed. Technology has changed all of these different things. And that's the reason you need to bring in the subject matter experts who can help you in the given areas where you need some support. You still know what you're doing, you're still running the business, except again, everybody needs to be humble enough. I can't do it by myself. I need help. And it's the organizations that are looking for that help that are going to succeed, in my mind.
absolutely. And what I think you just pointed out is something I'm astutely aware of is there is a place and time where if things slow down in the ability to exchange value, and it could be people in the HR kind of world, right? And I'm not able to exchange my value because my value is not being seen for what it could be inside of an
Hmm.
organization, you're now at a place of diminishing returns. You're in this
Yeah.
space of diminishing returns, and how do we recoup that? How do we recalibrate in a way that we can go back to the original objective of the mission? It goes back to your mission statement.
Right.
Even as an entrepreneur, what is my mission? What am I here to do? What do I stand for? What are my personal morals and values and the types of business that
Hmm.
I want to do as I try to solve a problem? And you can be an intrapreneur and trying to solve a problem inside of an established organization, and that's a value exchange. So let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's at the corner of pivot. I
Hmm.
think pivot is where you find business leaders going, okay, that didn't work over here. Let me pivot and go over here. What are they chasing?
Yeah. 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 It's very true. And again, it goes back to the mission, like you said, is that if we are struggling, something's off with let's do it this way. One of the books I just finished was about accountability,
Mm,
and the author talked about three things relative to accountability: never blame, number two, look in the mirror. What's your role within these problems? Because you play a role in it somewhere. And then number three, what are the processes we need to adjust? Because 98% of the time, it's a process, it's not a person. It's like, Connie, you screwed this up, and Connie, it's your fault. No, no, it's a process that's been in place again for 6 years, 8 years, whatever it might be, that's never been updated, and therefore, and I think so much of this goes back to people being people realizing they need to invest in themselves and they need to invest in their business, because if you're not doing that, you're going to stagnate. You're going to see you're going to stagnate. Your people are going to stagnate, and so is the company.
Yep, absolutely. And I've been on site with clients in my prior lives as well. And, doing that immersion is really important. And then asking questions of why are you doing a thing? You have a piece or a process, a step in a procedure, standard operating procedure. And one of my favorite experiences was, a particular woman was doing a procedure. She had no idea why she was doing that procedure. She had no
Yeah.
idea where it fit. She had no idea where that data that she was entering actually moved from point A to point B and how to prove that that data was correct. And
Yeah.
so that's a process right there. But yet, if something were to go wrong with a field that she was inputting, the blame would come from upstream
Right.
or the downstream, right? The role would be looked at like, well, this particular person has this role to put in information into a field. And now the adjustments that we're seeing is we're starting to automate information. We're starting to streamline operations. We're starting to implement AI. We're starting to put AI into procedural automations.
Hmm.
But if the AI doesn't know the why or where that source of information is coming from, because the human doesn't know where the source of
Right.
information came from, what good is that procedure and process that's being automated?
Right. That's right.
So I think it's a blend of technology here with humans that we've got a really potential spider web that we're going to all be untangling as business owners as we try to bring technology into our business places.
Yep. That's right.
So not only do you have culture, now you've got culture meshing with technological advancements.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So
That's right. I mean,
accountability gets really muddied there.
it does. I mean, it really, really does. And I mean, I think back to some of the mistakes that I've made over the years. And yeah, I've made mistakes. There's no getting around it, except instead of blaming myself and say, okay, what procedure, what process needed to change back then? And there typically is some sort of process or whatever it might be. And I mean, I remember an old boss of mine one time. I took a risk, and I changed a procedure on my own. And again, it's a long story. It's too long to try to explain. I still remember getting the email from Joe. You submitted this information to me. You did it on your own, and other people were supposed to be involved. You didn't involve them. You need to explain to me why. And he was so angry, and I was just kind of like, Joe, I'm trying to change a process here. And instead, all you're doing is making me think, forget it. You figure it out then. It's just like, oh, and like you said, that spider web of
Uh-huh.
everything and trying to untangle that becomes a nightmare.
Yeah, it can be. And I think one of the other topics I'd like to talk with you about is, as we face technology coming into organizations, um, the culture, when you have an organizational leader, and you mentioned a couple of kind of like trade spaces, right? Like a towing company, you
Hmm.
mentioned a real estate. Those are
Yes.
very different environments when it comes to the use of technology or the lack and
Hmm.
avoidance in some cases of
Oh,
technology.
absolutely.
What are you seeing as far as the meshing of culture to make room for technology and to carve out more time for human connection?
I think I'm gonna go back, Connie, that the people who are going to succeed are the ones who are open to change, who are open to technology, are willing to learn, and are willing to adapt. And one of the reasons I say this, I'll go back to the towing company. Okay?
Okay.
They are they have, I think, 5 or 6 what are called rotator trucks.
Okay.
Okay? These trucks are capable of picking up 18 wheelers, train cars, and that kind of stuff. They're, when God forbid, except it's reality, there's a terrible accident and a trailer has overturned, a train has derailed, whatever it might be. These rotator trucks, number one, retail for over $1 million a piece. Number two, they are operated by a joystick.
Mm.
It's a joystick by, obviously, a human being. And everybody needs to understand is that, yeah, we are no longer hooking up, the truck and we'll write it this way. And it's like, no, it's all about the technology and it's all about the blending of the humanity with the technology. And it's interesting because one of the owner of the towing company has a son who has said, I definitely want to run this company someday. Absolutely, positively, I want to run this company. Jacob is one of the best rotator operators in the country. Okay. The manufacturer of the truck itself has called him to their facility to train people on how to use the rotator. Loves it, passionate about it. Just, this is the greatest thing of all time. And it's like talking to him is like, Jacob, you need to understand that if you want to run the company someday, you're going to have to come off the truck. You're not going to be on the truck anymore. Oh no, I'm not doing that. I can run the company and I can say, no, you can't. No, you can't. And again, point being the adaptability, the mission statement, who are you? What are you? What are you all about? Do you want to run the company? Fine. Or do you want to stay on the truck? And there's nothing wrong with either choice.
Nope.
I'm not going to, oh, how could you do that? That's stupid. No, it's not. It's up to me. That's my choice. First person singular. Except you don't get both. You can't have it both ways.
I love that because it's nothing unlike some of the young entrepreneurs, where you can kind of tell they're, really not comfortable doing a sales thing. But as an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, you wear multiple hats. So you have to kind of put yourself into all of those different roles to really move your independent company together, right? You have a business entity, but that business entity is only going to extend to the community as far as you put yourself out there.
that's right.
And, there's a really great way that I kind of talk about the whole who are you, what do you stand for, what's your why,
Yeah.
is that's the essence of you and what your brand is. That whatever you're building, you could name the company whatever you want to
Hmm.
name it. But
Sure.
if they don't understand who you are and what you stand for, then how do you build trust with those customers that turn into larger organization contracts that you build your company through and you start scaling? Some people just have a great idea and they just want to transfer the idea and they want
Hmm.
to work on a project that has meaningful. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to start their own business. So it's
Right.
always a very real conversation, like you just had with that young man, of what matters most to you, what's going to bring you the most joy and the most balance in your life. And
Right.
culture is a big part of that because, in the work that I do with, helping people understand how they're emotionally designed, the culture is what you're immersed in as a young person,
Hmm.
and kind of experiment in what your parents show you, what your church leaders show you, what your school leaders show you, and you're picking up nuggets of culture. And then you land yourself in your first job, and then you take nuggets from there too. So, I mean, I think that that's why I asked, how many company leaders have you noticed like they're bringing previous culture nuggets with them from
Hmm.
job to job before they land in a true leadership position?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do you help them
Uh,
reconcile that?
so much of it, yeah. I mean, I'm reminded in the moment of my old colleague and friend still,
Mhm.
Dave Beverly. Dave's tagline used to be, your whole life brings you here.
Mhm.
Every single moment of your life has brought us right to this moment, 3:51 Eastern time on February whatever. It's just your whole life brings you here. And I mean, we do that. We bring all of these different nuggets and needing to understand this is what's helpful to me. I'm going to keep using it. This is no longer applicable. I need to get rid of this. Keep what you need and throw the rest out.
Absolutely. Yep. Keep what
And
aligns and what doesn't. You can navigate by
exactly,
contrasting experiences. And it's the
exactly.
contrast where we find in the depths of the contrast, I believe that's where people find their most meaningful nuggets. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
that was a lesson. I really screwed that one up, or that
That's
was
right.
really great. Let's do that again.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, my nephew Jeff is he's a physician in
Uh-huh.
Seattle, and he's been practicing now. Oh, I don't know, 8 9 years, something like that. And talking to him, and I was like, Jeff, would you ever consider getting into administration? Would you ever want to run a hospital or something along those lines? And he laughed out loud. He's like, are you kidding me? No chance. He said, I'm a clinician. I'm a researcher. And he said, that's who I am and that's what I want to be. And I was like, Jeff, that's wonderful. Good for you. And he knows that because he knows who he is, what he is. And again, I admire that in anybody. Again, one of the most important things for anybody to do, get to know yourself on a very deep level.
It's so important. It really is, especially when there's so many examples out there, digital examples, digital representations, or even fragments of identities that are online. And I feel bad for some of the youth because they're so confused on, who is it that I should follow? Who stands for what they stand for? And how do I know that I align with that?
Hmm.
And there's not really anybody that teaches us how to really understand that unless there's key influencers around us, our parents,
That's
our
right.
church leaders, our school leaders
That's
that
right.
give us space to really explore what is our strengths, our talents, and our abilities.
That's a whole nother show.
Absolutely.
Well, no, to that point though, Connie, I have believed for years, and I have argued for years that at the minimum high schools need to be teaching those skills
Absolutely.
and letting kids learn. These are your strengths. These are my strengths. These are my limitations. This is how you can listen effectively. This is, just all of these different life skills that nobody teaches these kids. Nobody. And, there's, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you actually raised that because I think that goes back to my whole point of, and if you haven't read this book, I would highly recommend it. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it
Oh,
is about the youth. And it actually started. There's an Anxious Generation website. I think it's fascinating that the number of projects around how do we help dispel the anxiety that our youth is feeling. Those are our future leaders, right? Those are our future
that's right.
government leaders, our future community leaders. They're trying to make decisions, but they're so anxious about the future that they're finding themselves in this place of apathy or frustration and
Hmm.
agitation.
Hmm.
There was a couple of individuals in the last, I don't know, probably week or so that I ran into, and one of them was a school teacher. And she actually was sharing with me that the kids in school, I've lost a bit of what's called executive function. And the executive function is where and how they break down the path for tactical execution,
Hmm.
the sequence. What do I
Yes.
have to do in order to accomplish a goal? And
Yes.
how do I back up from the end state of that goal into a place of what does that look like to get to the goal?
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
executive function is where there's deficiencies that are identified. And I had a really good conversation with her about some of this has to do with how easy technology has made everything. We have instant gratification. We have
Right.
point and click, right? You're not navigating and turning pages in a book to find something. I remember going through pages and pages of research documents for a book report in school through encyclopedia set at the library. There
Yeah.
wasn't a, hey, just Google or go ask Siri,
Hmm.
go find me a thing. So the executive function inside of these developing brains is struggling a bit because of
Yeah.
the technology that they are using
Hmm.
and the critical thinking exercises and experiences that they're having
Yeah.
are too late by the time that function has really kind of been developing in school, and they get into the real world and the internships and the entrepreneur kind of accelerators, and they're really struggling to put these concepts together.
That's right. That's
So
right.
from a culture perspective, how do we make room for that? How would you recommend, organization leaders carve out room for interns and, entrepreneur type of programs inside of their organization?
I mean, it's anything like that where these kids can get exposed to this is how we make decisions. This is how we do things here. This is truly how we think here. And I wish I could have had something like that all those years ago. And I mean, just from a you said it from a critical thinking perspective. Those skills are just, in my experience or my observation, just aren't there anymore. They're nowhere near as solid as they need to be. And I mean, I would love organizations to have, to welcome these interns, just and just to get them involved in anything, and my point being, involve them, let them sit in on important meetings. Again, obviously they're not going to contribute, and that's okay, except they need to hear, hey, what about this different alternative? How are we going to fund this? Well, okay, if we do fund that, then we've got to take money away from this project. And they may not internalize it at the moment. Moving forward at some point in time, they're going to realize, oh,
That's how we got here.
that's what that meant.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important. And I think you're bringing up something else that, I've had some conversations about, and I think, have we forgotten how to be a diplomatic community and have, purpose or dialogue that's actually got a purpose to it? And rather than argumenting, one side or another
Right.
and debating an opinion or speaking at someone, there's a difference between speaking, communicating, and having dialogue.
Hmm.
And the diplomatic process that organization leaders go through to really narrow down on something of importance is important. It's important to get to an outcome
Hmm.
so that we can move to the next phase in a strategy, for example.
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you
That's right.
how how important is that in your cultural type of conversations or some of these goal settings? Is when do you recognize that there might be just the missing link of a diplomatic process within organization leaders?
A lot of this comes down to formal training, for
Mm,
me at least. I mean, it does, Connie.
mhm.
One of the things I always talk to people about is how critical it is to set expectations. Even before, but if you and I are going to have a difficult conversation, whether there's a mediator there or not, there's just, just assume it's just you and I, okay? Connie, listen, we need to talk about how we have been handling ourselves in meetings. We've been raising our voices, we've been yelling at each other. Again, whatever it might be, whatever the issue is. My point, Connie, can we please do this? How about, could you please give me your perspective first? I promise you, I'm not going to interrupt you. I'll listen to you. I want to understand you. Once you're finished, how about if I present my thoughts to you, and would you honor me? by listening and by not interrupting me. And then once we have everything on the table, maybe we can figure out where to go from here. People don't have those kinds of skills, and that's the kind of thing people need to learn, so that it's exactly what you're saying, Connie. We're not yelling at each other, we're not screaming at each other, and we can be we can have a conversation. I mean, I don't know if this is applicable or not. Still, I'm a big football fan, and
Okay.
I've been a New York Giant fan for years and years and years. I was talking to a guy a couple of weeks ago, who's a big Eagle fan, and the Eagles were in the playoffs, and I made the comment to him. I was like, Jeff, I said, just assume with me for a second that the Eagles lose Sunday. And I wanted to ask him about, did he think there was a possibility their coach could get fired? And I just said, Jeff, assume with me the Eagles lose Sunday. Connie, he looked at me, and this is a guy probably in his late 30s. I won't even consider that possibility. I'm not talking to you about this. He turned his back on me. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me right now.
Wow.
And again, it was a personal thing, except it was just like, you can't even talk about that. I mean, what are you going to be like in a meeting room or in a board room or whatever it might be? It's like, my goodness.
Yeah, it makes it challenging for sure. Yeah, I think it goes back to open-mindedness, just being open to receive someone's space or presence, is really important. And, I think there's a space and grace is a term that I know in the women's population. Sometimes we say, we got to hold space and grace for one another. What
Hmm,
does that really mean? And, holding space means I'm trying to understand where you're coming from
right.
so that I can at least try to understand your perspective. And then grace is obviously if you're saying things that are a little difficult for me to receive right now, the tone may be escalated. You may not be so diplomatic. There might be some overbearingness kind of things happening. And those are all behaviors and moods that happen when somebody's needs aren't being met somewhere.
Right.
And, those are difficult patterns sometimes to get out of or to talk your way through. And I think it takes that emotional intelligence that at some point you're not going to have an email behind you, in front of you. You're not going to have a
Right.
text message flowing between you. You're going to have to show up in a face to face meeting or at least on Zoom. And, we have to be able to move beyond without that residue of that experience following us.
That's right. That's
You know, I,
exactly right.
yeah. So I think you bring up a really important point. So, what does it look like for the community that might be listening that goes, you know what, Ron's really got some important um, principles, and we need a little bit of Ron in our organization. How do they find you? What does it look like to engage you, and what are you looking for in a client?
Connie, the easiest way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Just, my name, RLB Training and Development. And I think what am I looking for in a client truly
Yeah.
is exactly what we have been talking about. I mean, it really is somebody who is open-minded, somebody who's willing to talk, and somebody who is willing to see if we are aligned. And if we're not aligned on either end, so be it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I want. And I mean, I will do anything to help a client. Anything as long as they are willing to help themselves.
I think that's a fair statement to make. Is there specific types of industries that you really want to make a difference in, leave an imprint, leave an impression, and help to transform change?
You know what? People have asked me that a lot over the years, and the answer to that is no. There's not. And the reason I say that is because the industry doesn't matter because people are people.
I love that. I think that's so important. I think that a lot of people are recognizing that when it comes down to it, commerce is commerce, right? We can
Right.
exchange our value.
Hmm.
Business is business. We're all just bringing different solutions or, products to the market. And the
Right.
marketplace is what's full of people.
Right.
Yeah. So awesome. Any other parting thoughts that you have before we wrap up today? Or some
The
brainstorming?
only Connie, I just really, really enjoyed talking to you. And I mean, I think one of the most important things here is these are life skills.
They absolutely are.
These are skills that will not change over time. I like to say to people, 2 years, 7 months, and 87 days from right now, how important will emotional intelligence be? Same thing, probably more important than it is now. How
Absolutely.
important will it be to listen and so forth? It's timeless, and these are timeless skills.
That's very well said. And I think that, until we don't have language anymore, which I don't see happening, the human nervous system and the human language are the signals to how we're going to get
That's
things accomplished between us. So, well, thank you for being on the show with me and having this conversation. I know that we meandered, but I think it was really, really good to kind of explore some of these areas.
Thanks, Connie. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Unlocking Commerce and Business. If this conversation resonated, here's what you can do. Subscribe for weekly conversations with survivors, innovators, and changemakers, building regenerative alternatives to extractive commerce. Share this episode with collaborators, partners, funders, and changemakers in your network. The people ready for restorative commerce need to hear these voices. Drop a comment below. Tell us what patterns you're recognizing or what solutions you're building. We read every one. Commerce is everywhere, and healing extraction patterns inside our communities creates regenerative commerce outside. Like a lighthouse, we're here, exploring and cutting through fog, pointing toward what works. Welcome to the era of restorative commerce. Until next time, explore courageously, build sovereignly. You are the source and store of value. This is Connie Davis signing off. Thank you for being here.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.